Hey everybody, it's me, Root Beer, and it's been a minute since I've recorded a solo video, huh? So, since we're at the end of 2024 now, I figure it'd be good to just get back into content creation by getting a little yap session out where we can recap the year that I've had in Vanguard. And I'm just talking about myself. I'm not going to be recounting the game overall. So, starting off the year, it was a little weird. I've talked in the past, back when we were doing the podcast, about feeling a little disconnected, just in terms of being really invested in a deck. There were a bunch of things where I wanted to like them, and then they never fully clicked with me. The list of decks like that are super long. Like I tried Nirvana, Bob Sagra, Leonorn was a deck that I wanted to like. And none of them fully captured my attention. And coming into 2024, I kind of had a similar experience with Prism. So if you've been following for a long time, you'll know that G era Prism was one of my favorite decks, and I was very excited to have them back in D format as an encounter. So when they first got revealed, I was already a little disappointed by the way they were designed. They just didn't have a ton of application for premium specifically, but whatever, they at least were still pretty good in standard. So the first time I went to locals with it, it did feel pretty good. Like I was kind of getting that feeling that I had back in G era. And then, the week after I tried it again, and I believe that was a more competitive experience. I think it was a Vanguard day, but that one did not do nearly as well as the first time. But also, in addition to not doing particularly well with it in the tournament, the deck also just kind of felt a bit tedious. It kind of felt like, oh, I'm just spamming the same two cards over and over again, There weren't enough prism names and not enough general flexibility for you to do kind of cool combos the way that I felt like you could in G era. So I was like, oh, that's disappointing. My favorite deck turned out kind of boring. And so after that, I tried out a few different things. I played Pacifica for a little bit. I do like that deck, although it's not particularly strong, so I never stuck with it too long. I also just kind of played Fortia on a whim. Fortia is something I would describe as a drawer deck. It's a deck that it's okay. I don't really like it the same way you would say like a pet deck. It's just something I kind of keep in my drawer, and every couple of months I'll take it out to go 2-2 at locals and be like, yep, that's about what I expected. And so during that same time, we also had the Stride decks come out, Luard and Shiranui. I did buy the Luard deck and played it a couple of times, but again, didn't love it and just had zero interest in Shiranui at all. So, coming from the end of Overdress, I was just kind of waiting for Divines to come out. As we started getting information for that, a lot of the faded ones and the concept of the divine skills seemed really interesting. So I was really excited to try that out. And if you remember a couple of videos from earlier in the year, Chris Rain in particular was a deck that I was really wanting to sink my teeth in. It was the first time I felt like I wanted to really experiment with a deck, and I was really hopeful for the idea of okay, this is a 3 attack deck, but because they gave it this weird little guard restrict that you could theoretically use to kind of grind your opponent out of sentinels, it's like, okay, maybe we have something there where it can form a kind of control-ish strategy where you're trying to build up to the divine skill. Although I will say, as more support has come out for Chris Rain, that is not what happened with the deck. And, at that same time, I was also playing Reziel and Varga. I was trying out everything as I normally do. I'm a bit of a hoarder. But, neither of those decks I would say I was particularly in love with. Varga is quite boring, and, Reziel's nice, but as time has gone on, I've just kind of gotten attached to other decks, which kind of brings us to set 2. So, at first, I was really interested in Blangdmire. I thought that deck did a lot of the things I particularly wanted out of Chris Rain. So, as we were getting reveals, I'm like, okay, Blangdmire is super interesting. The concept of deleting your opponent's Vanguard, it's like a big dumb guard restrict, and I do like Dark Irregulars from back in the day. But then, as I was expressing interest in it, Atlas also wanted to play the deck, and I got that little brain parasite where I'm like, well, if other people are going to play this deck, then I don't want to. And especially once we were doing sneak peeks at locals, a lot of people started building Blankmeyer, so I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to play Blankmeyer because everyone else is. Like, what else can I do from this set for like the constructed cup? And the other thing that came out in that set was Liel Amorta. So I ended up building that deck instead, and I did go 3-0 at the Constructed Cup and won, like, the playmat that I use in some videos. In fact, let me just go get that real quick. So yeah, I won like this playmat from going 3-0 with Liel. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm doing this now. And so since then, Liel has kind of become my pet deck. I was talking at the beginning of this video about how I would keep trying to like get myself invested in something. Being a content creator, it's like you do kind of want to have a brand, you want to have a deck where people are kind of associate you with it. And so after a long time of just trying to make that happen, I feel like it just sort of happened organically with Liel, where, I did well with it in Constructed Cup, and then there wasn't a whole lot else I was interested in doing for Set Two's format, so I just kind of kept playing the deck, and slowly over time, I would like upgrade the rarity of it. It's a deck I felt compelled to experiment with, even though it's not particularly great. But, when the Dual Nations came out, I was experimenting with Valtrosa. When Set 3 came out, I considered putting like Paranum or whatever it's called, the like triple R grade one that's like call something from hand, draw a card. So, like, I keep experimenting with Liel, and there was also a brief dip of disappointment where when she didn't get anything in set 4, I was like, oh no, the character that plays Amorta in the anime is gone, so Bushiroad's gonna, like, forget about the deck. And then, of course, Erica slash future Hikari came back, and we got support for the deck in set 5, and that also marked a point where I started getting more invested in the anime. So, like, Liel Amorta is a deck that I really have latched onto, and that I feel like has increased my investment in the game, both like having a deck that I can just like and be associated with, but also the fact that it got me back into the anime. It's like, okay, we finally have that like deep investment into the game that I've been looking for. So for set 3 format after that, I played Stalharaja because that was just like a cool deck. Wanted to try out Shoujo Doji because I did have the deck from all the way back in like set 8, but again, Shoujo Doji became meta and the deck is hard to play, so like the brain parasites got to me again, and I ended up never playing Shoujo Doji, just played Stalharaja for a bit. Ended up did building Blankmeyer eventually once Atlas divested himself from the deck and played Welstra instead. Took it to BCS for Sacramento actually, which was taking place during the like set 3 slash lyrical format. Things just kind of worked out in a way where I didn't have access to my lyrical decks at that time, and for some reason I talked myself out of playing Style Hiraja, even though that was what I had been playing up until that BCS. And so I took Blankmeyer, got shit on, went like 2-3, I think. Ended up losing to like a bunch of Reziels and a Varga, which, ugh. And that's also part of the reason I like kind of stopped being invested in Reziel was I just keep taking a bunch of like bad L's to it. I remember during a Vanguard day, I was playing Liel Amorta, and then the first time I played against the Reziel, they didn't have a great opening, but like towards the end, I got lethal on them. They miracle healed, just naturally ripping a heal trigger off the top. The next turn I got lethal again, but they had the divine skill, so they miracle healed a second time, and I'm just like, alright, cool. Reziel is now my nemesis. Uh After that, we got set four's release, and set 4 was a set that I like really, really like. In terms of meta impact, set 4 wasn't like the greatest set in the world. It mostly came out with a lot of tier 2 decks, and I feel like price wise wasn't like that big of a splash on the game. But I personally really like a lot of the Destined ones. I think they were all like really interesting and cool in their own ways. So I really liked Alcalibra just being like big dumb Unga Bunga deck, me make big number win game. It's something that you can just do to like turn off your brain, and it's also a very cheap deck. I did make an Alcalibra deck profile before, but it might be worth revisiting it again to just be like, hey, this is probably the best budget deck you could be building right now. Also got really invested in like Lichia Fail. So first time around, I didn't do particularly good with it. I think it was for a Yumino Kesho. So I just kept losing to a bunch of Michus during that time. But I'll admit I was using like a different build of the deck that was probably not as good after I corrected the deck to just be running Willista, Ride Line, and Stregas. I ran it back and went 3-1 at a Vanguard day, I think. So yeah. Lichia Fail is a deck that I am also like very much into. Like Alden was nice as just like a little budget thing since I already had, or maybe not budget, but as like a side thing since I already had all of the like Keter Sanctuary stuff from playing Reziel and Liel. So that was just sort of like, all right, well I have it, and since I bought a case of set 4 anyways, I just had all of the destined ones. So yeah, really like that set. I think the Destined ones are all pretty cool, like decently budget decks. I think Lichia Fail and Alden kind of get inflated price-wise by just the expensive generics. And Lichia Fail in particular probably does need all of the generics, so kind of hard to justify playing that on a budget, but I do like the deck, and again, Lichia Fail is another deck that I just kind of became associated with, at least at my locals. When we were pulling sneak peeks for set 5, someone pulled the frame rare of the grade 1 for Lichia Fail, and they turned to me and they were like, hey, you want this? So, again, it's nice just having a couple of decks that I'm kind of associated with now and kind of leads into what we're doing right now in set 5. So, obviously, Lichia Fail is still a pretty good deck. Still playing that. Like Alcalibra, still doing well. Still probably the best budget deck you could be playing. I'm gonna have to make a video about that eventually, probably. Still playing Amorta, obviously. Over time, I have just amassed like a ton of high rarity cards for Liel Amorta. I think I might like that deck just a little bit. And of course, new additions. It's like, all right, Levidras. I liked it in set 4 back when the deck was bad. I thought it was kind of an interesting like deck building challenge to try and figure out a build for it. But now that we are in set 5 and Imperio makes the deck go from being like a C tier, like barely playable strategy to the best deck in the format if you high roll, then now I'm kind of like, I don't know. Imperio's kind of lame. Uh, Also, we got Liel Odium, the kind of evil version of Liel that's coming out for Dark States. I'm kind of feeling the same way about this deck that I feel about Blangdmire, where it's a deck that I like conceptually. Like, I like the idea of playing a slower paced deck with some, like, decent control tools, trying to build up to a big OTK Divine Skill turn. But in practice, it just kind of feels like bullshit. Like, both of these decks are just like, all right, they don't have the long term sustainability to get past their divine skills. So it's like, okay, either you do the thing and you win immediately, or you don't and you lose. And it's just kind of a frustrating experience with that. So, like, probably going forward, I'm still going to jam Lichia Fail because it's a pretty decent deck. Like, Alcalibra is something I can do when I want to turn my brain off. And of course, Liel Amorta is still my favorite deck, and I'm gonna keep messing around with it, even if it's not the best deck in the format. And going forward, I guess I'll build Glory Maelstrom out of obligation because I do like that card specifically, being the first big dumb guard restrict Vanguard, I believe. And, set 7 feels like it was specifically designed to destroy my wallet because we're getting the Battle Siren archetype finally. We're getting a new Bob Sagra, so maybe I can give that deck a second shake. And it has Almagestar support, which, even though I don't actually like the deck, I do just have all the support cards for it, so I will just build it for fun. And that was kind of my year in Vanguard. I hope you enjoyed this little recap and look forward to more things happening in 2025. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.